Born in America, denied citizenship? 14th Amendment case explained. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It started with a knock. Early morning, cold light filtering through kitchen blinds. And then 3 sharp raps. Maria Alvarez froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Not today. Not ever. Especially not them. On the other side of the door stood 2 men in dark jackets. One held a clipboard, the other a badge. Department of Homeland Security, the taller one said. Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions. Maria's heart dropped. Her hands began to shake. This was her home. She was born here, in Texas, in 1996. Her birth certificate said so. But none of that seemed to matter anymore, because they were here, and they weren't smiling. To understand how Maria reached this moment, we need to step back. Back to 1868. The Civil War had ended. America was trying to rebuild. Slavery had been abolished, but the wounds ran deep. Congress passed the 14th Amendment, a powerful promise to the newly freed. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. It was bold, clear, sweeping. It meant that no matter your background, your parents, your skin, your status, if you were born on U.S. soil, you were a citizen. For over a century, it stood as law. But now that promise was under attack. And Maria was caught in the storm. Maria Alvarez was born in a small hospital outside El Paso. Her mother, Carmen, had crossed the border while pregnant, desperate, alone, hoping for a better life for her unborn child. She gave birth in the U.S., signed the documents, held her daughter in trembling arms. She thought it meant safety, security, a future. Maria grew up American, spoke English, played softball, pledged allegiance, graduated high school with honors. But now, at 29 years old, that identity was crumbling, because the government had questions about her birth, about her documents, about her right to call herself a citizen. Quietly, over the last decade, certain departments began a process of review. They called it verification, but many saw it as something darker. Targeted investigations, requests for original birth certificates, doubt cast on midwives, on Latino families, on anyone born near the southern border. People like Maria suddenly had to prove they were Americans, even though they'd never lived anywhere else. Some were denied passports, others were deported. And in Maria's case, she was now facing denaturalization, a process that could revoke her citizenship entirely. The agents sat in her living room now, asking calm, cold questions. Where were you born? Who delivered you? Was your mother in the country legally? Maria answered as best she could. But the truth was, a midwife had delivered her. The hospital had closed years ago. The paperwork was incomplete. The midwife, accused in another case of falsifying birth records. Guilt by association. That's all it took. The government marked Maria's case for further investigation. Her passport, revoked. Her job, suspended. Her identity, unraveling. Maria's story wasn't unique. From Texas to Arizona to California, hundreds were facing similar struggles. People born in the U.S., raised here, educated here, now being told they weren't American enough. And behind the scenes, a quiet legal war was brewing. One case in particular was headed for the courts, a case that could define who belonged and who didn't. And at the center of it stood Maria Alvarez, because she had decided to fight back. Late one night, Maria received a call. A civil rights attorney had read her case file. He wanted to represent her, pro bono, all the way to the Supreme Court if needed. Maria was stunned, but something inside her sparked. She had lived too long in fear. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every child born under the same sky. Every mother who gave birth in hope. Every family whose story didn't fit a perfect mold. Maria said yes. And with that, the battle began. In the coming weeks, Maria's case would catch fire. Headlines, interviews, protests. Supporters called it a constitutional crisis. Opponents said it was about national security. But for Maria, it was simple. I was born here. I've never known another country. How can I not be an American? The court date was set, and as the nation watched, one question echoed across every home, courtroom, and Capitol hallway. The answer would reshape the nation. Long before Maria Alvarez ever heard a knock at her door, the battle had already begun. It didn't happen in the open, not at first. It started in legal memos, policy drafts, quiet conversations in government hallways. What was being discussed? Something unthinkable, a direct challenge to the 14th Amendment, and the idea that being born in America automatically made you American. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, had been a cornerstone of American democracy. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens. That sentence changed history. It overturned the Supreme Court's infamous Dred Scott decision, which had denied citizenship to African Americans. It guaranteed that no future Congress, no racist lawmaker, no extremist court could ever strip someone of their birthright. Or so we thought. In 2011, a conservative think tank published a paper. Its title? Rethinking Birthright Citizenship. It argued that the 14th Amendment had been misinterpreted for over a century. The authors claimed that children of undocumented immigrants were never meant to be automatic citizens. The phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof," they said, excluded them. It was a fringe theory, a legal long shot, but it found powerful allies. Within certain corners of Washington, the idea began to gain traction. Advisors, senators, staffers. Some argued that the 14th Amendment didn't apply universally, that it was time to re-examine who deserved to be a citizen. And behind closed doors, a plan took shape. No need to repeal the amendment. That was politically impossible. Instead, they would reinterpret it. Quietly, they'd begin revoking passports, flagging birth certificates, casting doubt on documents, all without ever changing the Constitution. In South Texas, immigration attorneys began noticing patterns. Clients who had valid birth certificates were suddenly being denied passports. Federal agencies claimed the documents were insufficient. Midwives were accused of fraud. Records were scrutinized. Hospitals were questioned. Families that had lived in America for generations were suddenly labeled suspicious. The burden of proof had shifted. Being born in America was no longer enough. Then came the revelation that shook legal communities nationwide. In 2017, the Justice Department launched Operation Janus and Operation Second Look. The goal? Review thousands of old naturalization files, find discrepancies, revoke citizenship, not from criminals, from everyday people, citizens who had lived here for decades, immigrants who had followed every rule. It was the first step in creating a list, a line, between those who were American in law and those who were American only until someone decided they weren't. Somewhere in a federal building, Maria Alvarez's file arrived, flagged for document irregularity. Her midwife had been accused in a different case years earlier. That was enough. Her file was opened, her name added to a list, and without warning, her identity became a legal target. She was never told why, never shown the evidence, only informed that her citizenship was now in question. In national media, the debate ignited. Was birthright citizenship an outdated concept or a sacred principle? Cable news hosts took sides. Some called it a necessary reform. Others called it an attack on the Constitution itself. And in the middle of it all were thousands of Americans like Maria, too American to be foreign, too foreign to be protected, suspended in legal limbo. When attorney Isaiah Grant took on Maria's case, he knew the stakes. He had spent years fighting immigration injustice. But this was different. They're trying to rewrite the Constitution with paperwork, he told the press. He filed a lawsuit, demanded discovery, and found something chilling. Internal memos, emails between federal agencies, draft talking points for press briefings, all pointing to a coordinated effort. Not a glitch, not a mistake, but a plan to challenge the very idea of what it means to be American. Civil rights groups rallied. College students marched. The ACLU joined the legal team. Maria became a symbol, a face on posters, a name in chants. But behind the scenes, she was terrified. The pressure, the scrutiny, the threats. Still, she pressed forward. Because this wasn't just her story. It was a warning, a mirror held up to a nation forgetting its promises. As the case headed to federal court, the Department of Justice tried to dismiss it. No standing, they argued. National security risk, they claimed. But the judge refused. He saw something different, a constitutional crisis in the making, and ordered the trial to proceed. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Inside a packed federal courtroom in Texas, the air was stiff with tension. Journalists filled the gallery. Protesters gathered outside. Legal analysts called it one of the most important cases in modern immigration law. At the heart of it, an 8-year-old American-born girl, and a government arguing she didn't belong. The case of Doe versus United States had quickly caught fire in national headlines. But beyond the noise was a family fighting to stay together. Maria and Luis Alvarez had come to the United States from El Salvador during the political unrest of the early 2000s. They had settled in Houston, built a quiet life, paid taxes, had a daughter, Isabella, in a local hospital. For 8 years, Isabella went to school, sang in choir, and played soccer. Then ICE came knocking. The Alvarezes were detained. And Isabella, though born on U.S. soil, was labeled an accompanying alien minor. She was placed in a foster shelter. Her citizenship was challenged. And the question exploded into the courts. Was being born in America still enough? The Department of Justice made a stunning claim. They argued that because Maria and Luis were in the country unlawfully and under temporary humanitarian status, their daughter was not entitled to automatic birthright citizenship. This was a direct challenge to the 14th Amendment, specifically the subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause. Historically, courts had interpreted that to mean anyone born on U.S. soil was a citizen, except for children of foreign diplomats or occupying enemies. Now, the government was suggesting a third exception, undocumented or non-permanent residents. The legal community was floored. If successful, this argument could strip citizenship from millions of children. The defense, led by immigration attorney Carla Ramos, pushed back hard. She pointed to over 120 years of legal precedent, beginning with the landmark 1898 case United States versus Wong Kim Ark, where the Supreme Court ruled that a child born to Chinese immigrants in San Francisco was a U.S. citizen, even though his parents were not. Ramos argued passionately, "If the government succeeds here, we are rewriting the Constitution with fear instead of facts." The gallery erupted in applause. The judge banged his gavel. But the message rang clear. This wasn't just about Isabella. It was about every American-born child of undocumented parents. Week 2 of the trial brought in expert witnesses. Historians testified about the Reconstruction era, during which the 14th Amendment was adopted to guarantee citizenship for former slaves and their children. Law professors debated the intent behind jurisdiction. Then came the most powerful witness of all, Isabella herself. Tearfully, she told the court about being separated from her parents. Her voice trembled as she held up her birth certificate. "It says I was born here. Why does that not count?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the government attorneys looked uneasy. As the trial dragged on, the nation divided sharply. Some praised the government's stance as a needed reform of outdated policies. Others saw it as a dangerous overreach. Protests grew outside the courthouse. News segments aired heated debates. Members of Congress began drafting resolutions. The president made no public statement, but sources claimed the White House was watching closely. And then leaks. Internal DHS documents surfaced. They showed the administration had been planning to quietly redefine birthright citizenship for over 2 years. This case was just the tip of a much larger effort. Both sides delivered fiery closings. The DOJ insisted the Constitution was being abused as a loophole. The defense called it a betrayal of American values. Judge Thomas Melville, a conservative jurist with a reputation for strict textualism, recessed the court. He promised a ruling within 30 days. The world waited. 30 days. That's how long the world waited. 30 long, tense days after the final gavel dropped in a Texas courtroom. People refreshed their news apps like clockwork. Cable news aired countdowns. Protesters outside the courthouse didn't leave. Neither did the media. The judge? Silent. Until one morning on a humid spring day, the docket changed. A ruling had been filed. Federal District Judge Thomas Melville was not known for dramatics. But on this day, he stepped into a role few could imagine. The courtroom was packed wall to wall. U.S. Marshals manned every entrance. TV crews were stationed outside. Live streams were already pulling in millions of viewers across the country. Melville entered with a thick folder in his hands. He didn't smile. He didn't hesitate. He read his ruling clearly and slowly, every word heavy with weight. This court finds that the plaintiff, Isabella Alvarez, is entitled to full citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Silence. Then an eruption. Isabella's mother burst into tears. Her attorney embraced her. Even journalists stood in stunned awe. The ruling was clear. Isabella Alvarez, born in Houston, Texas, was a citizen. Despite the government's claims. Despite the immigration status of her parents. Despite the fear. She belonged. The Department of Justice wasted no time. Within 3 hours, they filed for an emergency stay. Their appeal was signed and delivered to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. But more than that, they skipped procedure and went straight to the top. The United States Supreme Court. A request for immediate review. In a move that stunned legal analysts, the Supreme Court accepted. Fast-tracked. Expedited. No lower court reviews. It was unprecedented. The Supreme Court issued a one-sentence explanation. The constitutional interpretation of the 14th Amendment is a matter of urgent national importance. It was official. The question was now bigger than Isabella Alvarez. It was bigger than her family. It was about everyone. Across the United States, the country braced for what was next. News tickers ran nonstop. Analysts debated every possible outcome. Congress members held press conferences. And on both sides of the aisle, something rare happened. People agreed that this moment could change everything. One cable host said it plainly. This isn't just about immigration. This is about the foundation of who we are as a nation. The protests swelled nationwide. In California, high school students walked out of class, chanting, "Born here, belong here." In Florida, an anti-immigration rally was met with counter-protesters. In Washington, D.C., the Capitol steps were filled for days. Immigrant families held up signs with their children's photos and birth certificates. One sign read, "This is my daughter, born in Dallas. She's American. Don't erase her." Tensions were boiling, and the Supreme Court had yet to hear arguments. Inside the chambers of the Supreme Court, the mood was serious. Chief Justice Samuel Reynolds, moderate, methodical, called emergency conferences. Each justice received hundreds of amicus briefs from legal scholars, historians, and civil rights groups. The stakes were almost too large to measure. The justices would not just interpret law. They would define identity. Oral arguments were scheduled for May 15th. By then, the country had reached a fever pitch. Lines formed outside the court building 48 hours in advance. Police shut down streets. D.C. went on high alert. Inside, both legal teams prepared for the most consequential hour of their lives. Isabella sat with her parents in the front row. Just behind them, senators, former judges, and activists from both sides. The Chief Justice opened with a single haunting question. If we deny citizenship to a child born here, where exactly does that child belong? The courtroom went silent. The government argued first. They claimed that the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof" was misunderstood. That undocumented immigrants were not fully under U.S. jurisdiction in the constitutional sense. Therefore, their children should not automatically be citizens. Their attorney closed with, The Constitution is not a blanket that covers everyone without condition. It's a compact between the governed and the government. Without lawful presence, there is no compact. Then came the defense. Carla Ramos, a fierce civil rights litigator, rose calmly. She cited every major 14th Amendment precedent: Wong Kim Ark, Plyler versus Doe, even Dred Scott. She framed the government's argument as an existential threat. If this court accepts the idea that birthplace isn't enough, then every citizen's status becomes conditional. That's not law. That's chaos. She turned toward the bench. This child, she said, pointing at Isabella, was born on American soil, raised under American law, and educated by American teachers. What more do we want from her? Some justices nodded. Others frowned. Justice Camille Wilkins, a strict originalist, asked tough questions about 19th century interpretations. Justice Helen Ortiz, the court's only Latina, asked, "If this child is not one of us, then who is?" No one had a good answer. The arguments ended at 1:04 p.m. The country held its breath again. On June 1st, a surprise announcement rocked the nation. The court would deliver its opinion on July 4th. Independence Day, a national holiday. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. From that moment forward, July 4th meant more than fireworks and flags. It would now mark the day America redefined what it meant to be American. Isabella returned to school. Her parents remained under IC supervision but were allowed to stay pending the ruling. The legal community braced for impact. Some feared the end of birthright citizenship. Others believed the court would uphold tradition. No one knew for sure. On July 3rd, news helicopters circled the Supreme Court. Crowds camped overnight. And when dawn broke on July 4th, millions of eyes turned to Washington, D.C. Because in just hours, the Supreme Court would decide the fate of millions. The fate of one girl. The fate of a country. July 4th. Independence Day. But this time, it wasn't just about fireworks. At exactly 10 a.m. Eastern Time, the United States Supreme Court released a decision that would send shockwaves through every corner of the country and beyond. Hundreds gathered on the marble steps of the court. Millions more were glued to screens. Schools paused summer classes. Offices turned on the news. Families sat huddled around TVs and phones. Would America remain a nation of birthright citizenship? Or would everything change? The ruling was 5-4. Split, razor thin. But enough. The majority opinion, authored by Chief Justice Reynolds, was read in part from the bench. To deny citizenship to those born under the flag of the United States is to unravel the fabric that has held this nation together for over a century. The 14th Amendment's Citizenship Clause means what it says. Isabella Alvarez is, and always has been, a citizen of the United States. Cheers erupted outside. Tears flowed freely. Inside the chamber, Isabella sat stunned. Her mother clutched her hand. Her father whispered in Spanish, "We did it." The decision had been made. But not everyone celebrated. Justice Wilkins' dissent was scathing. The majority has interpreted the Constitution as a blank check, ignoring the framers' intent and surrendering sovereignty. Today's ruling opens the floodgates to unchecked citizenship. His words ignited fire in political circles. Within minutes, the ruling became a lightning rod. On the streets of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, celebrations broke out. Bells rang. Car horns blared. Social media exploded with the hashtag Born Here Belong Here. In more conservative towns, outrage took over. Talk radio declared the ruling a national betrayal. A congressman from Arizona called for a constitutional amendment to override the decision. Within hours, protests erupted in multiple cities, both in celebration and in fury. The Alvarezes were finally free. ICE dropped their case. The family returned home to Houston, where neighbors lined the block, waving flags and holding handmade signs. One sign said, "Isabella is America." Overnight, she became a national symbol. An 8-year-old girl, born in a hospital room in Texas, had forced the country to confront its identity. And she won. Within days, dozens of similar cases were dropped. Legal scholars called it the most significant affirmation of the 14th Amendment in modern history. Universities held emergency symposiums. Law schools updated their textbooks. Civil rights groups praised the ruling as a bulwark against rising nativism. Still, some lawmakers drafted bills to narrow birthright citizenship through legislation. The debate wasn't over, but the Supreme Court had spoken. The ruling didn't just impact the United States. Countries around the world watched closely. In Europe, debates about immigration reignited. In Latin America, the ruling was hailed as a victory for diaspora communities. In Canada and Australia, political leaders reaffirmed their own birthright policies. America had drawn a line, and the world responded. Amid all the noise, Isabella returned to her normal life, or tried to. She went back to school. She played soccer again. She stopped having nightmares about being taken away. But she would never be the same. Neither would the country. Her mother, Maria, told a reporter, "We didn't ask for this, but we're proud we stood up. Not just for Isabella, for everyone like her." The Constitution held. The nation debated, argued, shouted. But in the end, it upheld a principle that had lasted for over 150 years, that if you are born here, you are one of us. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a defining moment. One little girl, one family, one amendment, and a verdict that reminded America who it is and who it must continue to be. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.